Welcome to the Herpcore History podcast, presented to you by Little Shop of Horrors. Feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms for any of your feeder needs. All right, let's go ahead and get into this episode. All right, tonight I am joined by Mr. Mike Pingleton from the So Much Pingle podcast, and thank you very much for being here tonight, Mr. Pingle.
Well, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So what got you into reptiles early on?
It's kind of one of those fuzzy, complicated stories. I really got into them when I think I was 12. But I had always kind of been interested in them going back into elementary school. Until I was 9, I lived out in the LA area. My family was out in a place called La Puente, and there were a lot of herps out there. We had fence lizards on. Everybody had a fence around the house, and there were fence lizards everywhere, and alligator lizards, and lived on the edge of some hills. So there were California king snakes in the neighborhood and gopher snakes, and I have a really fuzzy memory of trying to catch what I think now was probably a neonate or a very small rattlesnake with a butterfly net. But that back then, butterflies were my big passion. That was the thing I was really into, and the herps were kind of on the sideboard, if you will. But then when we moved to the St. Louis area, and I found a snake in the backyard. We had like most suburban or urban neighborhoods, there's a pile of bricks or boards in the backyard somewhere, and we had both. And there was a little Midland brown snake under the board, and I put that thing in a jar, and as one did back then, and kept it in like a little jar terrarium for a while, and just sort of it just sort of opened up my mind to possibilities. Like, well, I have snakes in my yard, and where else are where else can I go to see snakes, and what other kind of snakes can I find? And so that it would have been 1972, so quite a while ago. And fortunately, I had a science teacher, and I had him both in middle school and high school, Donald Koitzer, who was also into herps, and he was into science, and he really kind of educated me, and not just on the various types of herps, but also how to find them, and how to be responsible with them, and how to not treat them as treat them with respect as a living organism, that kind of thing. So, yes, thank you very much, Mr. Koitzer. And that's kind of how I got started there. I spent a lot of time first, before I had a driver's license. I spent a lot of time wandering around on my bike or on foot to the various wooded areas around the house, and that in search of mostly snakes. And back then we called it snake hunting. We didn't have any fancy field herping, terms like field herping or whatnot. So, hey, Mom, I'm going snake hunting. That was it. So,
yes, sir. Well, excellent. So when you said that Mr. Koitzer gave you advice on finding snakes and doing that, what was that advice like, and how did it change your herping game?
Well, as a little brat, I really had no idea. You figure I found a snake under a board, I would go find snakes under other boards or under other rocks. And of course, that's me going around the neighborhood. Anybody that had a loose rock or a board or any kind of thing where I could get to it, their front yard or whatever, I would look for it. And of course, there was some success there. I find more brown snakes and more line snakes and things like that. But what I really didn't have any idea about was the other particulars that come with with herpetofauna, and that is, if it's July and 100 degrees, you're probably not going to find, snakes out in the open, but I really hadn't figured any of that out yet. It's just, it was just sort of a blank slate when it came to things like that. Uh, so Mr. Kreutzer was instrumental in trying to, give me some information about how reptiles actually operate. Well, amphibians too, but at the time my main focus was snakes. And so, him, kind of, teaching me that, what they need, what their needs were in terms of, you know, uh, you know, uh, basking and, getting out of the heat and water and that kind of thing, and when they're
Yes,
most
sir.
active. And so he kind of brought me into that. And then, I think it was, the following year, my 13th birthday or 13th Christmas, I got, a copy of Conant's, field guide to the Eastern, United States, which is, the little green book, for those of you that are old enough to know. And that kind of opened my mind up to other possibilities. Like, well, look at the range map on the Kirtland snake. If I could just get over to Illinois or Indiana, maybe I could find one of those. So it sort of got me thinking more, outside of my neighborhood, if you will.
Excellent. That's so cool. And then, so kind of your next evolution. So kind of 13 set you off. You got your book and started going through and just, I assume, just fixating on pictures and then going back and trying to find the range map and go, okay. And then is when you turned 16, is that when you started hitting up those areas?
Well, yeah, a little bit. And I also had a buddy in high school who was also interested in snakes, and so I didn't really have a car until I was, I think, 18 or 19. But he had a car much earlier, so he had a Ford Pinto, uh, powder blue Ford Pinto, for the things that you look at them too hard and they explode. Uh, and so we did a lot of herping around the St. Louis area. Then, anytime we had enough money for gas, we would get in there and get in that thing. And there was a time when the clutch was going out, and so anytime we had to start, I would have to either get out and put and push start it to get it to engage, or stick your foot out the side and out the door and try to get it moving.
Yes, sir.
But those are fun times back then. So we kind of went within 30, 40, 50 miles of home for those kinds of trips, and that also filled in things you interested in seeing but you couldn't see in your neighborhood. So we would find speckled king snakes and black rat snakes and that kind of thing. So that's when it kind of became a fun thing to do. Anytime it was the right weather or the right season for it.
Yes, sir. Excellent. And so what? So it seems like your parents are relatively supportive of this hobby throughout.
Not at all.
Oh, okay. I
So
think.
this is the early 70s, Lewis, and it's a much different world back then. Um, People would hear your relatives or friends or whatever would, they just thought you were weird. It's like, what is wrong with you? And my parents were no exception. I think they really thought there was something wrong with me, uh, for about these are unhealthy interests for a young boy. Why aren't you playing football, or well, actually I was playing football, but why aren't you doing the things that normal boys do? But it was a different time, and that sort of pursuit, it wouldn't even have to be herps. I could still have had an over I could have still had a really strong interest in butterflies,
Yeah,
or whatever it would have been. That would have been weird and not productive, and that's no way to get have a career. You're never going to turn that into anything useful. So
yes, sir.
uh,
Yeah.
so very different times. I think my parents were really kind of concerned from time to time about that. I, of course, was not allowed to keep any herps in the home or anything like that. So, yeah, so it was not the times are so different back then that that we had a herp society, and like many big cities did,
Yes, sir.
we had St. Louis Herp Society, and they would meet in the, oh gosh, what house was it? The Monkey House, I think, the basement of the Monkey House at the zoo. Second Sunday of every month, and I would, if I could get a ride with my buddy, I would take the bus up to the zoo and go to the herp society meeting,
Yes, sir. Yeah.
and then for 2 hours once a month, you could be with other people who were into the stuff you were into, and you felt normal. I mean, 2 hours, 2 hours a month, you felt like, you're just being normal, because
Yes. How
everybody
many?
else in the room was, in your boat, the same, same thing.
Yes. How cool is that? How many people were there roughly when you started attending?
At that time, there were probably, I don't know, I'd say between 20 and 30 attending at any given in time. It very, uh, some youngsters like me, and some plenty of adults, and some very colorful people. I'll just say,
Yes.
um, the hobby does attract some colorful people, and that was no exception back then either.
Yes,
But it
sir.
also
Yeah.
had some interesting people that were, grown ups that were doing cool things like driving to West Texas, and these guys would come back and talk about their experiences. They would put these uh, fancy light packages on their trucks and drive down to West Texas to look for gray banded king snakes. And so I heard all those stories, and then, so that was like, it was an amazing time, just especially for a young. There's no internet then. There's nothing. There's very
Yes, sir.
few books. There's no magazines per se, that, so you took whatever you could get wherever you could get it, in terms of sustenance, in terms of, great herp stuff, great herp stories or information and that kind of thing. Nobody knew how to breed anything either back then.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Still trying to
When
figure
you
out how to.
in that time and as you were there, did was there one or two points or conversations or talks that were given that you sat there and you went, "Holy crap," and really opened up your mind? Any that stick out to you?
Yeah, I think the one or two, uh, yeah, the travel logs usually were the ones that, guys would, and again, we had no PowerPoint.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Putting together a presentation usually involved an overhead projector or a slide projector. So, on those rare occasions where people would, uh, bring slides from their herp trip somewhere, that was a big deal. It was a big deal for other people too, holy cow, somebody went to California and then, shared their trip. There's Crotalus ruber and things like that on a on a really crappy little slide.
Yeah.
But that was big stuff to me. It's like, I think that was always, it's still kind of a draw that, places that, exotic places, say far away places with strange sounding names.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's so cool, and especially it's so iconic to see it in that form because I remember my grandmother had a slide projector, and I remember looking at pictures on that, and it's a very I can see it in my head still what that looked like.
Yep.
And so, to think back and kind of visualize that and then imagine being, an enthusiast like yourself and just being like, to your point, it stood out that, hey, this is this amount of time I get to spend with these like-minded people. How
Yep.
cool is that? Now we get that on the internet, and how fulfilling is that compared to getting to walk into a room of people, and especially that first time nervous, and then you walk in and it's like, holy crap,
Yeah. Yeah. And so you made some friends. I made friends, and uh, you know, even though I was kind of a shy kid then, but it was you didn't have to say a word really. You could just sit in the room and soak it all up. But it was great to make some friends, and just be able to network a little bit. Uh, Back then, though, it's just such a different time, and I sound like the classic old guy, right? It's like, well, in my day, if you wanted to talk to some herpetologist, you had to write him a letter.
Yes, sir.
you know, or if you somehow managed to get a phone number, you could call them. Uh, so you might have a telephone conversation with somebody, somewhere else too. So those are the kinds of things that you had available to you. No, that was about it.
Yes, sir. Well, and that, but too, we, even though access is easier, I wonder how many people are following up with different professionals now, and how much that happens. And it's not just, random discourse, on some forum or something, but we do have such access to those people, and how much we take advantage of it now compared to then.
I don't think people really get into it very deeply. I know it's sort of a paradox, isn't it? I mean, we have all this access to all these people that can tell you or show you all these things, but we don't really contact them privately to get more information or to establish a little rapport. That doesn't happen as much as you think it should. But because I
Yes, sir.
think there's sort of by having all this access to information, we also have some barriers set up that kind of say, well, here's what I have, but I really don't want to. A lot of people don't like to talk on the phone, so that's kind of always been kind of weird, seem kind of weird to me. But my friends like don't call me, text me, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
So thing how we talk to each other has changed quite a bit too.
Yes, sir. Going from, yeah, writing a letter to be able to make a phone call,
Yeah, and
and
people would
especially,
write you back. They felt obligated. They would
yes.
write you a letter back. So
Can you imagine, man, if I ever got a letter, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I really have to reply to this. This is crazy.
yeah,
I'm bad enough with emails.
yeah, yeah. So different times. So just everything was different. How you learned. I mean, nobody knew how to breed any animals. We'd get. In a case, one of the cases is the Mandarin rat snake, right?
Okay.
I can't think of the genus. Oreocryptophis is the genus now. Back then it was a Leafy mandarina, and we get some imports in, and they abruptly die
Mm.
because nobody knew what the country of origin was, but they had no idea what the habitat was. These things are mountain snakes. They're coming up from cooler areas. They like cooler temperatures, but we're keeping them at good old Midwestern snake temperatures, and they weren't doing very well.
Yes, sir.
Um, and it would wind up their parasite load and whatnot. So we didn't know a whole lot of anything. There's just no way to get, especially for at that by that time a 16-year-old kid. There's just no way of getting a lot of information without extreme effort. You know.
Yes, sir. Did you ever, I don't know, did you ever try to breed anything in captivity? And
Yeah, I did. I was up until the '90s. I bred a lot of things. Of course, I'm interested in snakes, like so many people, and tried my hand at corn snakes, which was probably one of the first snakes that people kind of had figured out in like here's the recipe for corn
yes, sir.
snakes, that kind of thing. And so I tried my hand at that, and I got into, I did the local king snakes. I bred those, and as time went by, I would try to get snakes from elsewhere. Back in the early '80s, I was breeding African house snakes,
Okay, very cool.
Boadon fuliginosus, which was very satisfying. This is a snake very few people were working with, and it was a satisfying experience to breed them, and they get the really tiny babies to eat. You used to have to cut the hind legs off frozen hoppers and get them started on the legs basically, and but they were really cool snake to have. So it did things like that, and that was sort of the keeper community back then was a bunch of people trying to figure out a bunch of stuff,
Yes, sir. Yeah.
and people would say, well, I really like this. I like pine snakes, so I'm going to work with pine snakes. And we didn't have a big, people kept boas and pythons, but there wasn't like a big, people didn't have a big facility or dreams of cornering the market for anything.
Yes, sir.
It was more or less like, I really like these animals, so I'm going to try to work with them and understand them and breed them.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And that's definitely something you hear more about kind of early on, was just the genuine interest is what drove the hobby. And where now I think that you definitely still run into those people for sure. But a lot of the time, when you run into the average keeper, it's, oh, I got this to breed it with this, and I'm going to make this. And how sustainable is that over time? For the
Yeah,
animals.
yeah, um,
I don't know, kind of
yeah.
tangenting off there. We don't have to
No,
discuss that,
that
but
that's fine. I bred a lot of stuff, Lewis, until about the time that field herping really heated up for me, and I just kind of scaled back. But I was breeding. I didn't just work with snakes. I bred different types of geckos, and I worked with a bunch of different frogs, uh, and tortoises. And so, there was a time in the mid '90s when I had a big basement herp room, and I was just I had everything, and I was out with my kids, and we were collecting what we called lawn plankton. You go out to big empty lots and drag the weeds for insects, because I had 400 frogs in my basement to feed.
yes, sir,
Uh, and so that's when I realized, well, you've lost, you lost track of the narrative here. You're spending all your time uh, doing insect culture and insect collecting to care for way too many animals. So I just started scaling back then, and actually scaled back to the point where I don't have any herps at all. So
it,
uh,
it is interesting how that I feel like the hobby very much so interpersonally kind of progresses that way, where at a young age, it's just about just getting out there and doing it, and then it's keeping it. And for me, again, same personally, breeding them, and that's my one of my favorite parts of keeping reptiles is breeding. And then you get into field herping, and your collection shrinks down, and you focus on field herping, and it turns into bird watching, but for reptiles. So cooler.
well, yeah, cooler. Don't get me started. Uh,
Oh,
but yeah, I mean, I think part of the issue with the keeping things is it's trying to put nature in a bottle. It's
yes,
trying
sir.
to prolong experiences that you're having with animals, and it kind of works for a while, and it works when you're keeping a brown snake in a jar, or a turtle that you found in the woods, and in a little pool or something. It kind of works on that level, but then it kind of gets out of control. But after you're out in the wild, you don't feel that need, because you'll go back. I'll go back out in 2 weeks and do this again. So I don't feel the need to prolong the experience, if you will. And it's what's that, the comedian with the real fuzzy hair, the Stephen Wright. He always says this thing where he says, I have the world's largest collection of seashells, and I keep it on beaches all over the world, and maybe you've seen it. And that's it's funny, but it's sort of the approach for field herping. It's like, yeah, I mean, I can just go see those things if I have time and I have money. I can go do those things. I can see them where they live, and I don't necessarily feel like I have to bundle them up and take them with me.
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely now most of the animals I see in the field. I never even touch that animal, and I enjoy watching it in this little brief moment that I happen to be where it's at, and we're at the same time, and just watch it move. How lucky is that?
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, it flares up from time to time. I remember a trip to Baja California, and there was a trip we were on, and over the few nights of the trip, we found 6 neonate Baja rat snakes, rosy rat snakes. What is it? Bogotophis rosalii, and
Rosalia, yes, sir. Yeah.
Rosalia, yeah, however you want to say it. So we've got like 6 juveniles, and of course my mind's like, wow, wouldn't it be great just to take all these back and get a
Yes.
nice little group of these? And after a while I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
you know what's Let's not do this anymore.
Well,
So
I've heard many of a legendary man going down for a bad decision.
yeah, yeah. I
Sounds like an amazing spot, and what a cool species for sure.
Oh man, still one of my favorite snakes. Just really cool snakes. So and just Baja's a great place to go, and that's the I mean it's not just a cool snake, but a cool place to go and get one. The whole thing is this big package of memories and good times. So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That yeah, I feel like for me, Mexico comes up very often in these in these recordings that I do talking to people because they have so much cool stuff, and especially being into gray bands and suboc, getting to see the stuff they have down there. It's like what we have, but just a little bit different. And oh man,
yeah, there was some of that going on for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
yes, sir.
Yeah. In fact, some of my buddies are on a trip to southern Sonora right now, and I couldn't go on a trip this year, so I'm really kind of like gritting my teeth.
After starting a business, I understand that feeling 110%. Where you're like, I hope you guys do good. Send me pictures.
Yeah.
Text me anytime. I'm up whenever.
Racking, ricking, fracking.
Yeah. And then they send you the gray band. You're like, that's awesome. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah. In fact, I saw one of them posted a picture of a Sonoran foul snake, Sonora emula today, and I'm like, man.
How cool is that? How cool is that? But then also too, to think about, it's so interesting, right? So early on, the people around you weren't necessarily supportive of your hobby and getting into it, and how much that plays into your interest now. Was it, if you didn't have that pushback as a kid, would you still have this deep passion for it that you still hold, or did that help shape you into what it is now?
Well, I mean, I might be a little bit bullheaded, so that that might have been all of that. It's more like me just putting my head down and continuing with what I thought was interesting. Maybe I learned some things about uh, you know doing things my way, being autonomous and figuring out my own way of doing things or what I am interested in. It might have been a good thing in that regard, but it still was kind of hard to take. And everybody killed snakes back then, and everybody had a snake story about their snake that they chopped in half with a shovel, and they love telling you those kinds of stories. But so I think it's sort of one of those tests. Either it makes you stronger, or it makes you maybe makes you go chase butterflies instead.
Yeah. Well, you picked the cooler hobby, so good job, man.
I still like butterflies.
No, but butterflies are cool, and me talking mess about bird watchers, it's just a joke. It's a joke.
Oh, I know. I do it all the time. I do it all the time.
We got to have an enemy. It gives us drive in the field to keep going.
Well, I'm actually a bird watcher too. But
no.
One of my I do. I actually do get into birds. One of my favorite things to say is about field herping is if it was easy, birders would do it. So,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Shout out to all my birder friends out there.
Well, excellent. Well, excellent. So what? So you started herping out and getting out there, and so what were some of those early trips like, and where were some of your first excursions?
Let's see. Well, I in terms of as a teenager, I kind of stuck around to the area around Missouri. So I did a lot of Ozark herping and things like that. And I didn't go too far afield, Missouri and Illinois and that kind of thing. It was only later, of course, then, I grow up, I have a career, I get married, I have kids, I have all that stuff. And I'm still herping some, but not, not on any kind of big scale. Here and there with like-minded friends, we'd go out and go down to, the mango swamp in southern Missouri or something like that, or Snake Road in Illinois. We would do those things. So it was sort of on the back burner, but it was, always ticking there. But then in the mid 90s, I sort of decided that field herping was what I was going to devote all of my spare time to. My kids were older; they didn't need me as much. I had more free time, that kind of thing. Maybe a little more disposable income. So started to look around and decide what I wanted to where I wanted to go, pilgrimages, if you will.
Yes, sir.
And of course, West Texas was a big pilgrimage, and some of this stuff is tied um, to other to authors that I read. Well, like Carl Caulfield, which is a point of that's something a lot of people were inspired by his books about places he went herping, and so and also to an extent Raymond Ditmars as well, which is an author that hardly anybody these days knows much about. But I going to the places where they herped became sort of a big deal. So my first real big trip was out to West Texas,
All right.
1996, and so that three buddies of mine, and we borrowed somebody's van, really bad van, really bad shape, with the door kind of sometimes coming off. The sliding door was not in great shape, but we made it out there and we had a great time and saw a lot of all the firsts. Again, first Texas blacktail, first Trans-Pecos rat snake, and on and on and on. Never found a gray band, of course. I'm 0 for 5 on gray bands, but it was a great trip, and to go out to those places and see, drive the roads that Caulfield wrote about, and see the snakes he wrote about. That was kind of a big deal. So every year I would do one or two big trips somewhere. I went to Arizona, went to Okeechobee in South Carolina, that kind of thing. So we pick a different location and then go there.
So with West Texas, what area were you in roughly?
My first trip out there, we pretty much covered everything. We started out in Val Verde County and worked around Langtree, and then made our way over into Alpine and worked that area. Did down in was it Christmas Mountains and all that area, and into the park, and just kind of covered a lot of ground. I learned a valuable lesson on that trip though, because we just for me it was an 18-hour drive just to get to the area, and we basically didn't sleep much the whole trip. We basically got 3 or 4 hours of sleep every night on that trip, and so I don't have a great memory of that trip. I have big chunks of missing memory because
Sounds like
sleep deprivation affects your long-term memory.
yes, sir.
And I to this day I'm like I can remember the high points, like finding this suboc in the middle of the road. I can remember that moment, but I can't remember lots of moments that happened on that trip. So because of that, so I learned a lesson. It's like, man, you gotta take care of yourself a little bit, even make sure you get some sleep, and that important things like that. And again, it was a long drive home.
Yes, well, accurate for sure, but that does sound like a West Texas herping trip where it's like, I don't know, I was here and now I'm gone and now I'm back and I got this thing. Look at this.
Yeah,
well, excellent.
But it was great. It was a great trip, and it happened. We were out there like 2 days after a good rain.
Very nice.
So there's a lot of amphibians calling. Got Baird's rat snakes, which were several of those, and so just super cool experience, just to add a bunch of lifers, and went back a couple years later and kind of repeated the whole thing.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, hey, I've found a good number of Alterna now, but only one Baird's. So that's yeah, that, and still no Mexican hognose, but I've not put much. Usually I'm asleep at that time, getting ready for snake hunting all night.
Well, I Baird's, we here's the snake in the headlights, and it's like, okay, we stopped, got out, and it's like, oh my god, this beautiful big female Baird's rat snake, And in those days, you pick it up and you put it in a bag and you take photos of it during the day. And we, put them back in the same spot later. But there was some bagging going on in those days. But so we're getting ready to get back in a car, and I look up down the road the way the car's parked, and there's another one crawling across the road about 100 feet up. It's a smaller male, so it's like, oh man. So those things occasionally happen.
Yes, sir.
That's kind of like newbie luck, I think, maybe.
Yes, sir. No, I mean, I think that especially at that time frame, I think West Texas sometimes you do have those nights where it's just one after the other, and it's like, how is this possible? This is amazing.
Yeah, you get that what we call it a pulse.
Yes, yes, and then you sit there for days and years talking about it, going, "Why did this happen? What was it?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Endless speculation on that too.
Yes,
and
sir.
Of course, I'm out there with some enthusiastic people, and of course that means we're going to road cruise till dawn, right? Because it can only get better. And of course, after 11 or something, we didn't see a darn thing until a night snake at 3 a.m. Because it's the movement's over for that night. So those are the kind of things you learn too.
Yes, sir, for sure. Yeah, and over time, I've definitely something to talk about another time. But yes, no, that's spent a lot of time out there, and it's interesting how stuff moves around.
Yeah, yeah. You can devote an entire podcast to gray bands or West Texas, and
Yeah, the urge to not tangent off into gray bands at any second is always something I'm fighting like a car out of control.
Yeah. Well, by the 90s too, there was some internet. So, so guys like John Hollister, gosh, the guy who started King Snake, can't think of his name off the top of my head. There's just a few people out there that were engaged with that hobby with West Texas. So,
well, it's so interesting hearing you bring up John Hollister, because I've done this now twice where I go, it's crazy this guy's name popped up again, and I never had the fortune to meet John Hollister, but he taught my mentor about West Texas.
Okay, yeah.
And it's so interesting how this gentleman's name comes up over and over again. I never met him, but I knew his name ever since before I took my first trip out to West Texas. And so it's so interesting, someone like yourself that's not necessarily, a lot of the guys I talk to are very Texas centric and they're here. And so to hear John Hollister, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But then to talk to someone like yourself that's not necessarily from this area and go, oh, John Hollister, that guy was really consequential in West Texas field herping. And I don't, till talking to all these people, it's kind of now coming to me where I'm going, wow, he really spread the knowledge of what was out here.
Yeah. He spread the flavor around too on the internet. He would make some interesting posts and describe some of his experiences and that. So, he was a little generous with that. So,
yes, sir. Yeah, that's.
I don't think John's with us anymore.
No, sir, he's not. No, he's not. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
It is. So, hats off to Mr. Hollister for getting us all wound up.
Yes, sir. Yeah, for sure. That's crazy. Very interesting. And that's why I think it's so cool to do this. It's just because I kind of like, wow. This just keeps expanding. Very interesting. Well, thank you for that. So other than that, what were your other early herping experiences? Anything stick out to you where it's like, wow, this was, or just anything?
I think Kansas. That's a good one. Somebody I knew said you need to go to Kansas in May, and go to Central Kansas in May, and so. Again, a bunch of us piled in a car and drove with 9 hours from my house to Central Kansas. And I don't recall. I'm sure I'm not exaggerating, but I'm pretty sure we got over 100 milk snakes on that trip.
Wow.
They were just it's May, it's the right time of the year, and it's the, there's lots of big flat rocks on the sides of the roads and on the prairies, and so that was an interesting trip to go and just work the roadsides actually, and get what are I still refer to as red milk snakes, and then what's the next one over? It's been a long day and I can't think of it. There's
It's all good.
I think that's probably, it's all triangulum now, but if you follow that sort of thing. But anyway, just milk snake after milk snake after milk snake, and none of them looked the same. Everything looked, everyone looked different color pattern, different size bands, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a very interesting trip, and of course, thousands of ringnecks as well. Those ringnecks are all up and congregating to breed, and lots of things like bull snakes and red-sided garters and things like that. Just stuff. Large quantities of really cool snakes.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that's so interesting about field herping is, over time, it's not that there's still the focus on finding the target species you're looking for, but it starts to expand into the weather and then the plants in that area, and just an overall kind of understanding of the environment to try to hone in on what you're doing. And so for someone like yourself that got to travel to different areas, were there points in your trips where something made sense to you that didn't make, I mean, we could talk endlessly about this, but in your ideas?
Yeah, well, and I'd like to say I figured it all out myself, but I had a lot of friends who are keyed into some very interesting concepts that I wasn't really aware of. Although I like to think nowadays that I pick these things up on my own now. But for example, in Kansas, one of my buddies say, well, we want to look for drainages. We don't necessarily need water in them, but we're going to find more. We're going to find more snakes and lizards in areas where there's a drainage, where there's water part of the time. And that was true, so they tend to hang out. They're not going to hang out on the blistering, under the blistering sun on this dry, flat area where there's no chance of water collecting. You might find something there, but you're more likely to find something over there, along that little valley there where you can see some, rocks along where the rain would collect and probably run off there. And that's,
Yes,
we're going to have better luck. So we learned things like that. And then of course, first trip to Arizona, really didn't understand much about desert herping. I mean, again, where this is a early, this is late 90s when I made my first trip out to Arizona, and I didn't really understand, the desert biotypes. And one of the things a friend of ours who lived out there talked about is the importance of moisture. We'd found a Willardi, Arizona Originus rattlesnake.
Very cool.
And it was under a rock, and lifted the rock up in order to, pull the snake out and take pictures of it and stuff. And, then, my friend is like, I'll just call him Jeff. He's like, you've broken the moisture barrier here. And I'm like, what? He's like, well, that's a little humid. It's a little microhabitat, and there's humidity collects under there. The dirt is sealed the rock in, so it's a great little place to hide, to stay cool, and then there might be a trace of moisture under there, but you just kind of destroyed that. I'm like, oh, so then we're putting the rock back in place, and I took my water bottle and hydrated the soil all around it so that it resealed the rock in, and provided a little bit of moisture underneath it. And it's like, oh boy, how could I not understand this? But it's just one of those things where Jeff had figured it out a long time ago because he lives out there, but I didn't. I mean, I know it's hot out there and you got to drink a lot of water, but it never really occurred to me about how that works, what the dynamics of that are with snakes, with herps. So, you know,
Yes, sir. How
uh,
fascinating, and then to have that pop up. And so, who were some of your early mentors out field herping, or was it all? I mean, what was that like?
oh, you mean in terms of people who are out are involved with it?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Uh,
so like anyone that I mean, besides right, you were going to the meetings and kind of getting
yeah.
information there, and going, oh, I wanted to go to this area, so maybe you got it from there, or your early herping partners that really kind of stood out, or I guess
Um,
just
yeah.
mentors
Well,
in general.
yeah. Most of this is just either stuff I'm learning from books or things I'm getting from people who live in the area. Like you mentioned, John Hollister. Uh, that's a good uh, a good example of a guy who's really into the how things work. In West Texas and weather and things like that. And so there would I would run into people that would give us ideas. I don't want to say they're like big herping personalities. Some of these people are just friends,
Yes, sir.
who happen to live in the area and understand uh, what's going on. Of course, I don't mean to demean them or anything, but they're not these great big herping personalities or stars or
Yeah,
anything.
no,
It's
no.
just
There's
so Jeff from Arizona and Jim from Iowa and people like just friends of mine that knew a lot of interesting stuff and spent time working out some of the dynamics here. So
yes, sir. Yeah, and that feeling of accomplishment, for those people that when they do that, and then to be able to spread that, it's a very cool thing having a hyper
yeah,
focus on an area, kind of putting the time in to understand why those animals are doing what they're doing.
yeah, yeah. Uh, and I find myself, I mean, it's I don't know how do we describe this? It's sort of the mobile classroom that passes down the ages. Uh,
Yeah.
People teach me, I teach other people, hopefully in a way that's not demeaning, but I provide information that I can within my realm of experience that might help somebody else out, and
Yes, sir.
that sort of thing happens all the time. I think out there. And it may happen because of something I wrote in a blog post or something. People might pick it up from there, but I think I like the idea that just people learning from other people and passing it on.
Yes, sir, for sure. And I think, again, to highlight your podcast, I think it does such an eloquent job of bringing uh, more trained professionals in to kind of discuss what's going on, and makes it very digestible and understandable for the average person coming in, and it makes it seem not as on the other side of it. And I think it's a great format.
Well, thank you, and it's great to hear you picking up on that because there is no other side, uh,
Yes, sir. Exactly.
really, and we're all in this together. And you know, you can learn a lot from a scientist. So I always run into people who are like they don't know anything. Well, they do know some stuff, and they can tell you some stuff too, and and vice versa too. It's kind of funny. I've talked to. It's been my privilege to talk to many herpetologists, biologists, whatever you want to call them, or ecologists. And I'll say, well, what's your favorite episode? And I always think there's, point out some show where I talk to some other scientists, and they're like, no, I like the field herping shows. I like the shows where you're talking about field herping because
Yep.
I never get to do it because I'm in the lab or I'm teaching or I never get to do that stuff. So that's what so there's no wall. There's no
No.
other
No.
side. We're all interested and we're all applying our knowledge and our experience and our, what we're doing to that, so
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, and it's something that I feel like I've ran into with older school herpers, where there's some like pride in going like, oh, I saw this thing that that's not documented, and so I'm keeping it to myself. And haha, look at this. And and I find it peculiar because there should be that overlap, and why not get that written down and documented that this thing happened, and there's this weird stigma there that I don't think should be there, and again, why I think your podcast is so valuable.
Well, thanks. And yeah, doing the podcast that way is just second nature for me because I've been involved with other projects that have put me in touch with a lot of people, a lot of scientists, a lot of
Yeah.
I'm deeply involved with the Herp Mapper project, and that has been something that's put me sort of as a bridge between the common person in the field, gathering data, and the people on the other end, the scientists who use it, and the conservation biologists and people like that. So, I don't think there was any other. I started this podcast, which I did in the middle of COVID, and I don't know what possessed me, but I didn't sit down and go, well, it's going to be like this, and I'm going to talk to these people. We're going to have this will be the way it goes, and this will be the flavor of the show, and it's just sort of a projection of my approach to herpetology and herpetoculture and herpetofauna all together.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, I think that's just like anything within the hobby. Go after your interests, right? And so, like you referenced stand up, right? It's interesting. What makes a joke funny is to me is sometimes the person will explain a situation that you can relate with, but then they come at it sideways, where you're like, oh, I didn't think about it that way, and that's the surprise, the funny, and the joke.
Right.
And then, to hear where exactly, right, the thing that you started is just that's the way you think, and those are the things you're interested in, and it follows that path. That's what's so interesting about it, is because you do get to kind of jump in your brain and follow you along this little journey, and it comes out in a podcast, and I think that's very interesting.
I think probably I worked at the University of Illinois for 30 years. I was in I worked in IT, worked with academic research computing, and so I know academics because I worked with them and I supported them and I interact with them every day. I ain't scared of those guys, and I know they're not much different from the rest of us. They just they have these specialties and their brains have different approaches and different interests, but basically they're all humans like the rest of us. So it wasn't really, they've never that job kind of took away the mystery of academia for me. People I think maybe are intimidated by science and scientists sometimes, and so there's no need. They're just they're just regular people like the rest of us. So
yes, sir. And then you get managed by an engineer, and you go, oh. Okay, I see here. You go, all right. Just like me? I don't know. Maybe not just like me.
Well, yeah. But, they all put their pants on one leg at a time. They're just better at math or, whatever.
I don't know. Maybe they jump in there. They try to do something different. It's actually better. All right.
And this is not the show for it, but I have plenty of anecdotes about, why people in academia are also human, and there are many human foibles. So
yes, sir. But exactly to your point. Yeah, they're just people, and so again, yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah. So I feel lucky. I feel blessed to have a lot of scientists I call my friends. So
yes, sir.
And it's been great. So
well, especially too, you get when when you're the field herper and you get to kind of do get into conversations with those people, and they bring up a point that maybe you hadn't thought about it because they're kind of thinking of a more analytical way. For me, that's definitely a highlight in many conversations where you go, oh, okay, I see it now, and it kind of shapes a thought, and so that is so valuable as a field herper to get to sit there and talk with those people, and then usually have good conversations back and forth with them.
Right, exactly. You just you just have to not be the people maybe have a little trepidation about it because they think they're smarter than them or something. But yeah, once you start talking to them and have have a conversation, not a one way, tell me all you know type thing. Have a two-way conversation. Things starting to open up. I this sort of reminded me of something that's happened on the show a couple times too. Is like I'll be in a conversation with somebody about some cool aspect of herpetology or herps. I wonder. Well, I wish somebody would look into this topic, or blah blah blah. And other scientists were listening and made research projects out of that question.
Excellent. Yeah.
So that's happened a couple times, and that I know of, that people have told me. Emily Taylor has told me of a couple things that came up that people are like, yeah, we should look into that. So that's sort of a cross pollination thing that I love. Is like, yeah, it doesn't really matter where you're coming from. We're all in this. We all have things we've seen and things we've done that are questions we want answered, and there's no difference between us. So some people are going to pursue those questions.
Yeah. How cool is that? I mean,
Yeah.
that's are there any in particular that stand out to you? One that you were like, oh, like I win the debate, free beer, or
No. It's. I'm sorry. It's been a long day, so I'm kind of, my memory is a little
all good. No, all good.
uh,
No.
ragging on the details, but anything I can do to help pull things together, and just I guess I'm learning too to think like a scientist in many ways, because a lot, what are scientists doing? They're pondering questions,
Yes, sir. Yeah.
about what is the nature of life, or why do these animals behave this way? And you look at what Emily Taylor has done and her group has done with the rattle cams, where they put these um, cameras up on dens in Colorado and now California, and they're getting all these interesting behaviors that they're documenting, which are leading to other questions. Uh, and I think that's the thing I like about herping is, if you can just kind of find the cool snake and do the cool snake dance, or you can start thinking about, why is the snake here? What was it doing? What what led me to find this snake under these conditions? That sort of thing. So you start thinking in terms of questions,
Yes, sir. Yeah.
and you may not actually get the answer, but that's to me, that's a good way to start looking at what we do.
Yes, sir. 100%. And that's the most beautiful part about the hobby is that as you get more into it, it expands your thought process. And if you're really into it, there's so much good information out there that is adjacent to the thing that we're doing, and so it leads to so much knowledge that I wouldn't have searched out these questions if I didn't have the interest of this thing in there, and so I'm appreciative for that for sure.
Yeah.
Well, excellent, excellent. Are there any highlights through your herping where you were like, this is this is the best thing I've ever found? Any one story that's like, oh, this is it.
I have a lot of those.
Well,
So yeah,
I got all night, so which you can pick. We can go through them all, whatever. I'm good.
I think they're serial, right? They're serial. This is the best thing I've ever found, and then next year, this is the best thing I've ever found.
Yes, sir.
But there's always a few that stand out in my mind. I think one in particular was, I was in Taiwan. I retired in 2019, and in May 1st of 2019, I retired. By May 3rd, I was in Asia, and I was gone for a month, 33 days to Asia.
Was that your first time
And
over there?
and no, not my
Okay.
first time, but
Okay.
I went to Malaysia and Thailand and Vietnam and Hong Kong, and finished it up with Taiwan.
Okay.
And so I'm in Taiwan, and I'm with my buddy Kevin Caldwell, um, and we're driving up in the mountains, and there's a snake in the road, and it looked to me like some kind of viper, but it was at night, and got out, and it's a mandarin rat snake
Oh, cool.
crossing the road. So yeah, or was it Oreocryptophis mandarinus? No, but yeah, that's so finding a road cruising a mandarin rat snake in Taiwan, up in the mountains,
How cool is
uh,
that?
was cool. And of course, again, the whole mechanism of who, what, why, where, and when kicks in. It's like, why is the snake out? It's 70 degrees and it's damp. It just rained earlier. Why is this thing out when we are up? I don't know, several thousand feet up. It's kind of like being it's like a cloud forest almost where we're at, and it just sort of kind of came to the stunning realization that mandarin rat snakes are basically mountain king snakes.
Yeah. Oh my God,
They
we've been baking these things.
yeah, yeah, exactly. They're just basically a mountain king snake,
Yes,
uh,
sir. Yeah.
and they live at, where it's cool and where it might be a little wet, and they that whole climate, that cool wet climate, drives their movements and their not moving, and when they bask and that kind of thing. So that was not just a cool snake to find, but really starting to think about what these snakes really are in terms of how they fit into the world and what their world is like. So yeah, that was a big one, I'd say.
Well, how invaluable too, and what a great bow tie to a conversation where you go at the beginning when I was a kid getting into this herp society and what that meant to me. That this is a memory that sticks out being this species, and then to later on wrap it up with, and here it was in the wild and kind of seeing this thing where that was a question that was stuck in your head,
Yeah,
and how
yeah,
cool is that to achieve that,
yeah.
and that's super cool.
Something else on that trip too, and it is also tied back to the past. So when I was coming up as a teenager, I got a job at the St. Louis Zoo, and I worked on the railroad. I was a train conductor, and I sat on the back of the railroad and gave this little speech, and the back of the train and gave a little speech. And but I loved coming up to the zoo uh, when nobody else was at the zoo. Like in the winter, I would take if I wasn't working, I would take the bus up and go to the reptile house, and they had a large planted vivarium, which is very interesting for the time, with two full-grown Taiwan beauty snakes in it. Um,
What?
and these animals are just amazingly gorgeous snakes. And I would sit there for an hour and watch these snakes crawl around this planted terrarium, vivarium, I guess we call them, or paludarium, whatever you want to call them. And I'd think, what, I wonder what's it like where they came from, and would I ever see one of these in a while? What would it take? That kind of thing. Same thing. I would, have the same conversation in front of the sidewinder cage. How could I find a sidewinder? It's just a standard question in my brain at the time. So, fast forward to 2019, and the same trip, and then finding a my own Taiwan beauty snake. Same thing. Four nice big 4 foot Taiwan beauty snake, and it's like I've come full circle. You know, what's it going to take to get to find one? Where do I have to go? And what I guess I didn't consider is how long it would take me. It took me a whole lifetime, but I did get it. I did add that was a big checkbox, on the
Yes,
life
sir, yeah.
list. So yeah,
That's
uh,
awesome.
yeah. So, and that's part of the, I don't know. It's a quest, right? And so I think that's part of what field herping is too. It's a quest sometimes for things that we haven't seen, things we want to see. And then, we might write it in our little book, put a check mark next to it, and that kind of thing. But it's also, you know, it's an achievement. It's like like the kids play video games and you reach the next level. It's sort of the next level up, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's always. If I did it once, can I do it twice? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's to your point, yeah, you start to sit there and you think, like, what are the chances of me being here when this animal is here, and it has all this vast amount of space to move through,
Yeah.
and the randomness of it, that like, right, I made a decision 3 months ago to be here at this time at this
Yeah.
day, and I'm here and it's here. What
Yeah.
are the chances of that?
Yeah.
How did that
Yeah.
happen?
It all comes together. And, what if I'd stopped to take a leak or something and, was 5 minutes behind or 5 minutes ahead or whatever, missed the whole
Yes.
thing.
Are you ever driving and you're thinking, how many of these things that I'm looking for am I passing? To just see my headlights go by and they just
Exactly.
don't. And I'm there going, if I just please,
Yeah.
go on.
Well, it's like, in the Midwest, our standard question is, how many copperheads have you walked by in your life?
Yeah, I don't know.
And the answer is probably a lot.
More have seen me than I've seen them.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a haunting thought after a while, right? Where of depravity, where you're just looking for this one thing for over and over again, and you're like, man, I know it's looking at me. Like, you really kind of start getting close to losing your mind at that point, where you're like, they're looking at me. I know they're looking at me. If I just keep looking, I'll run into one.
Yeah. Yeah. Sooner or later, just sheer willpower. You might be successful.
Just spite the world enough to make it happen.
But it's not happening with me and Gray Band, so I'm going to have to get back out there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You have to come down. You have to come down and give a shot. Let me know when you come down. Well, excellent.
I might ask you for some tips. I don't know.
I don't, just dedicate more of your life than you should to walking on the side of the road. And
that's how we do it these days, right? We walk.
Well, we hit me up. I'll tell you my thought process on everything that I won't talk about here, because alternative hunting's a weird one. Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much. This has been Mr. Mike Pingleton from the So Much Pingle podcast, and please go check that out. The link will be down at the in the show notes and on this post. So give it a check out and
so I should give you a couple plugs then, if we're going to plug.
Yes, sir.
Plug the
Go for
show, which is in its sixth season. But I also point out that during a lot of crazy things happened during COVID, but I also put out a book called The Field Herping Guide with my co-author and good friend Joshua Holbrook. We wrote a book about how to go field herping.
Excellent.
Which is a great little book for the mother and father who've got a kid like me or like you that's bullheaded and wants to go find herps, but they want to help him, but they don't know anything about it. Here's the book. Well, I like to think every herper should have a copy, but yeah, I want to plug that book. So it's just called The Field Herping Guide, and it's available on Amazon and everywhere, I guess. So.
Excellent. Well, I'll have a link to that down at the bottom too. Well, excellent. Well, thank you very much.
One more plug. I might as well put in another plug. I'm also starting to blog again, which is something I used to do before social media kind of drowned it. So I have a bunch of blog posts up and some new ones coming up soon and that's at fieldherping.org. Fieldherping, all one word, .org.
All right, excellent.
So, yeah.
Great URL to have. I like it.
All right.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much for joining me. And,
well, Lewis, thanks for having me. It's been fun to talk to you.
Yes, sir. Excellent.
Let me zoom out on you here. Okay, you got a message for the time capsule?
Yeah, and it's simply this. My prediction for you is that even though you'll forget all about this in some way consciously, next summer at about this time, you'll remember to return.